bringing you the latest in tax credit news, insight, and analysis. This is Tax Credit Tuesday with your host, Michael Novogradac.
Hello, I'm Michael Novogradac, and this is Tax Credit Tuesday. This is the September 23rd, 2025 episode. My guest this week is Brad Elphick. He's a partner of mine based in Atlanta. Brad is one of Novogoradac's leading new markets tax credit experts. And I have him on the show today because the new market tax credit community right now is feeling very triumphant. I'd even say upbeat, energized, and excited. But as many viewers know, there's also a bit of hesitancy, wariness. There's a bit of caution, even some concern within the community as well. In short, I find myself looking at the new market tax credit community and thinking that all of us collectively feel we're at an incredibly promising time, albeit somewhat unsettling. Now, why do I say this? Some of the reasons are pretty obvious in terms of the reasons to be optimistic. We're on the brink of an award announcement of a record-breaking $10 billion new market tax credit round. Plus, the new market tax credit was made a permanent part of the tax code just a few months ago. And without that extension, the new market tax credit would have expired at the end of this year. And next month, at the New Market Tax Credit Conference that Novogradac is holding in New Orleans, we're going to be celebrating 25 years of new markets tax credits. I will note that we have several surprises in store that are still currently developing, and we have over 500 already registered for the event. So I do encourage you to register now as well as get your room booked now. The conference block is sold out, but there's plenty of rooms available in New Orleans. And if not, reach out to Brad Elphick. He'll help you. However, with all this great news and promise, as I noted, trepidation does persist. And you might be thinking, well, what's the causes of trepidation? Well, if you're asking that question, you probably don't have any, but hopefully, or unfortunately, I should say, after I share some of these concerns, you might have a bit of trepidation. First of all, the CDFI Fund Executive Director did step down a few months ago. Plus, the community development community is a tad worried about possible adverse effects of various presidential executive orders, potential adverse effects on the new market tax credit. There's also concerns about the various delays in the Office of Management Budget releasing CDFI funds, grant funds, and what derivative effects that delay could have on the new market tax credit. And oh, by the way, there is the potential, some might even say, I know Peter Lawrence, our Chief Public Policy Officer, would say the likelihood of a government shutdown in just over a week. And then there's also a lot of digesting that the new market tax credit community has to do with respect to a variety of CDFI fund administrative actions that affect the new market tax credit. So that's a lot of reasons for optimism and reasons for it to have a bit of trepidation. But that's about all I want to share on that, because Brad is joining us to discuss all of these items, and no one is in a better place to address these items than my partner, Brad Elphick. As most of you know, Brad leads the Novogradac New Markets Tax Credit Working Group, and he will be chairing the Novogradac Fall Conference in New Orleans. And as I mentioned, we have over 500 attendees so far, special surprises in the works, and I encourage you to reserve your room now. We have a lot to discuss, so if you're ready, let's get started. Brad, welcome back to Tax Credit Tuesday. This is your 20th appearance, including twice as the host, and the 20-time club includes you, Tony Grapponi, and Peter Lawrence. So welcome back.
Thanks, Mike, for having me. And it's nice to join such an elite club. So glad to be part of it.
It obviously goes without saying that I'm part of that club too.
Exactly.
But before we get into today's episode, please describe some of the services that you provide to Novogradac clients.
Sure. So as we've talked about before, the 19 times prior, I'm on the accounting side at Novogradac and Company. So I provide all of my clients accounting services, audit, tax, and so forth. And I focus mainly in new markets tax credits and low-income housing tax credits, and work with a lot of developers and such. on the new market tax credit side, what we'll be talking about today, I also lead the new market tax credit working group, which is an industry-based group of nearly 100 members that really focus on a lot of the technical issues and programmatic issues related to new markets tax credits. And so we focus on a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today. And so if you have any interest in joining that group, obviously feel free to reach out to me as well.
And let me thank you on behalf of the broader development community and all your fellow partners and employees in Novogradac, thanking you for your leadership of the New Market Tax Credit Working Group. It plays such a critical role in making the New Market Tax Credit ever more efficient and provided a lot of assistance and support that led to the permanency of the New Market Tax Credit. So it's great work that you're doing there. Now, I mentioned in the intro all the reasons for optimism. The permanence of the New Market Tax Credit, the pending $10 billion round, celebrating 25 years of New Market Tax Credits. Please share with our audience your enthusiasm and share a little bit more about the pending $10 billion round, if you can.
Sure. So obviously everyone's very excited about finally getting new market tax credit permanence. As you mentioned, it's been 25 years, which is hard to imagine it's been that long. You and I were barely getting started in our careers by then. But I got
to interject. One of us may have been barely getting started.
Right. Well,
I wish I was barely getting started.
Right.
I was well into my career.
So, it kind of became this notion that you just kind of figured that you weren't sure if it was going to happen. And obviously there were a lot of advocacy efforts along the way that you thought had a much better chance than potentially even this time did. But really, a lot of things aligned for the program. But I think the things that came together most were those within the industry. This time around, I don't know that I've ever seen our new market tax credit industry really come together the way it did to promote advocacy to make the credit permanent. And that to me was what was exciting, because it really exhibited what power a unified voice can have. And I think that everyone, looked at the opportunity in front of us and knew that there was a certain way that you needed to approach it. And, by being able to do that in a way that really kind of highlighted the best parts of the new market tax credit program, I think is really what helped get us over the line. But I would also say all of those years of advocacy along the way really helped ensure that we had champions in both the House and the Senate on both sides of the aisle, which was really exciting. The fact that, and so often we look at who has, who controls the House, who controls the Senate. And you think about depending on which party, which opportunity may be easier to get new market tax credits made permanent. And the fact that this was made permanent during a Republican majority in both the House and the Senate and the White House really proved kind of what the work that had been done over the years to ensure that we had champions on both sides of the aisle. So to me, that is an exciting part to be able to achieve it now.
Let me just interject there that I totally, would double or triple down on the fact that having such strong bipartisan, bicameral support was tremendously sort of important to the effort. But even sort of more than that is the great body of work that community development entities have done with the new market tax credit over the last 25 years, and all the number of businesses that have been supported by the new market tax credit over the years. That body of work was the critical factor in helping get permanency. I think you agree.
I 100% do. And I actually think that that's something that permanency will further enhance, because I think now with permanency, CDEs and projects can really build on doing even harder projects, even harder deals, those that maybe will take a little bit longer, but the impacts will be even that much greater. And that's what I'm excited about, is that permanency kind of gives everyone the breathing room to do that now, and to set up business strategies that can accommodate that, because there's not this cloud hanging over them of, will this still be here in another year or two? Now that, we have this, as I know you like to call it, is an indefinite part of the tax code, because it's in there until it's not, right? But,
Right.
for all intents and purposes, I think people see it as permanent, and I think we'll continue to structure things in their own practices in that way. And so that's very exciting. But on top of that, even before we were kind of really in this battle for permanency in this Congress, we had been focused on ensuring that we're in a good place to ensure that the program is getting the allocation that was authorized, that was legislated, out the door on time. And so the New Market Tax Credit Working Group and others in the industry worked to promote this idea of combining the 2024 and 2025 $5 billion rounds each into a double round that would be awarded by the end of 2025, which is what the original legislation, the 5-year extension, intended. And so when the CDFI fund announced that they were willing to do that, after some hesitation and maybe a little prodding from champions in Congress, they did agree to put together a combined double round of $10 billion. And as you mentioned, it's the largest round in our history. Before that was $7 billion. And I will say that, there was some concern initially about the size of the round and so forth. But I think now that the idea of a double round and the idea of permanency and such has helped everyone get a little bit more comfortable with that idea that there will be this large round, and we expect awards. The CDFI fund says fall of 2025, which when this Tax Credit Tuesday is released, that fall started yesterday on Monday. And if anyone's looking at their calendar and wondering when fall starts, so at any point in time, we could have the announcement of this double round. In our conversations, we've been hearing our conversations with Treasury and such. We're hearing between now and really mid-October is when we could expect it. And so I think there's a lot of excitement and a lot of preparation for that award, because in this round, we didn't see a huge uptick in the number of applications. And so I would expect there to be a high percentage of winners, because ultimately the CDFI fund has to balance between the number of awards and the size of the awards. And so I think, if you go back to a couple podcasts before that I've been on, I gave some predictions of what those would be. And to be honest, I haven't gone back to listen to what those were. But I think that we're saying anywhere between $65 to $75 million average award, which is significantly higher than what it had been in the past. And what this means is that CDs will be getting larger awards, but there will also be more awardees. And so out of the 200 and plus applications that were submitted, we could see well over 50%, closer maybe to 65 to 70% of the applicants being successful. And so, that causes excitement for a lot of those that applied. Obviously, those are the best odds that we've seen in a long time. So as we all patiently await the awards, I think there's some excitement, and you start to see CDE beginning to really fine tune their pipelines in anticipation of those awards coming out. So, for the communities for which this tax credit was intended, you're seeing some excitement in those communities as well, because they know that there's this much needed subsidy that will be soon available this year. And so they're also fine tuning their details, their numbers, and so forth. So a lot of excitement around permanency, around the double round as well. And we, as you mentioned, are planning to celebrate all of that at our conference in New Orleans in October. So look forward to seeing everyone there as well.
If there is a government shutdown, which, as I mentioned, is
so we've already moved from the exuberance to a cautionary tale.
What might that do to the announcement date?
Yeah. So right now, there's a couple things that I think factor into the announcement date. As you mentioned, unless the CDFI fund makes the award announcements by the end of this month, which is, a week away,
Right.
which is the end of the government's fiscal year. As you mentioned, Peter Lawrence, our chief public policy officer, has talked about it, and I think you and I are probably on the same page that it's becoming more and more likely that there would be a government shutdown, and if that occurs, it obviously is. If there hasn't been an award announcement, it's just going to delay the timing of that because it's likely we haven't seen a shutdown plan yet, but if history is any indication, the CDFI fund would not be considered an essential essential agency, essentially, and would remain open. Instead, it would be likely deemed, or most of the functions of it would be deemed non-essential, including the administration of the new market tax credit program. So, without being able to go to work, essentially, they likely wouldn't be able to make that announcement. Now, personally, I'm hoping that they see all this on the horizon and in the next week or so and decide that it would be important to get out those awards. And they know that there's this great conference in New Orleans coming up in a couple of weeks after that, and so want to get out in front of it. But I think that's going to be difficult, but not impossible. But I think that if a government shutdown happens, we're likely to, depending on how long it lasts. I think the conventional wisdom is about a day or two for every day of a government shutdown. The CDFI fund will probably lose a day or two on their timeline. So I think it'll be interesting to see if there is one, how long that will last.
And if we did have a mid-October awards announcement, when do you think the following round? It seems odd to be asking about the following round, but if there is a $10 billion round, then there'd be a following $5 billion round. How much time do you think there would be between the date that the awards are announced versus the next round opening up? And, asking, obviously, because those that are in this round or those who aren't in this round are thinking of applying to the next round will be wanting to know what they should be doing on the application front. So, the application is fairly involved and you don't want to be sort of waiting too late in the process to start writing them. Now's the time really to be writing them, but be thinking about when they might need to be submitted. So what's your best guess? What does your crystal ball say?
Yeah, and this is where it gets really difficult because there's a lot of factors at play here. And as I've been kind of sharing some of my thoughts with members of the New Market Tax Credit Working Group, the CDFI fund has been giving us different nuggets of data points to try to guess when that might be. Obviously, we have to have the awards from the double round first. The last round, this double round, was opened about 2 months after the previous round's awards were made. So if you kind of look at that, you're looking at an early December opening. You start factoring in holidays and such, and timing of this double round award announcements and whether or not there will be a government shutdown. You could possibly see that becoming mid-December. And then I start to wonder, does CDFI fund want to open up around in mid-December with with the holidays and the new year coming up and so forth. And so I could potentially see them making the argument to open it in January, early January. One of the arguments against the double round when we were proposing that topic a year or so ago, one of the things that the CDFI fund made was the argument that they can't open a round before the year for which the allocation is authorized. And so the next round would obviously be for calendar year 2026. And so would the CDFI fund use that as an argument to hold off the opening of the next round till January of next year? I think it will likely be December or January. So sometime in that kind of time range is when I'm thinking of.
Got it. And then open for roughly 2 months?
Yeah, it's the last round was open from, November 19th to January 29th, which was 71 days according to my calculations. And so you look at that, and that's likely to be kind of maybe a February deadline, maybe early March at the latest. But to your point, what's that?
I assume the thinking is the longer it is to get delayed, potentially the shorter the window is that it's open.
For sure. But to your point, there's no need to wait till to find out when that round's going to open. As you mentioned, I think, for most of our clients who have applied before, they've already started their applications. And I think that's the important thing. And as we'll talk about, with executive orders and such, and we even saw this a little bit in how people approach their applications, there is something to try to anticipate related to potential changes to the application in the next round, that we're still trying to figure out ourselves of what that might look like, and how substantive the changes could be for the next round's application.
So thank you for all of that. And I want to turn now to some of the causes of trepidation. And I was thinking of trying to go through it maybe like in a sequential fashion or something, but it all kind of rolls together.
Right.
So I'm just going to, give you a open landscape here. I mentioned, sort of in the introduction, there's a change in the CDFI fund leadership, or let's say the executive director sort of stepped down. I mentioned possible adverse effects of various presidential executive orders on the new market tax credit. And I've mentioned to you concerns about Office of Management and Budget and their releasing CDFI grant funds and any derivative effects. We've talked briefly about the impacts of a government shutdown. So share your thoughts on those various areas and the possible effects on the new market tax credit.
So when we became aware of the Director Pravina Raghavan stepping down, I think her last day was June 27th. So just before New Markets was made permanent, she had announced her resignation. And so anytime you have a change in the leadership at the CDFI fund, you always wonder how much impact that will have on kind of the timeline of each of these things. As you say, they kind of, roll together. And so, I think that in some ways, the double round may not be impacted as much because it had already been open and started and so forth, right? And so the putting in a new acting director is now Dietrich Douglas, who had been at the CDFI fund previously. So I think and the program manager, Christopher Allison, has been there for a long time. So there's some continuity, at least within the new market tax credit program office. And so I think that won't have as much of an impact on the double round. What I do think it could have an impact on is future activity at the CDFI fund, right? In terms of what their priorities may be for this next application round. As we know, the president has issued these executive orders that have really focused on calls for elimination of non-statutory components and functions of the CDFI fund. Fortunately, the Treasury had responded to that executive order and said that they believe that all of the functions of the CDFI fund are statutory. However, we have since seen through actions at the OMB that they have stepped in to put some delay on the release of grant funds that the CDFI fund administers. Fortunately, the new market tax credit is not a grant program, and so there's not dollars that have to be released that the OMB has to sign off on. So the impact of the executive order for now, our understanding is that it's not going to have much of an impact on new market tax credits, and especially these awards, as far as we can tell. Now, in our conversations with the CDFI fund, it does appear that they are operating business as usual, and that the timeline is similar to what it has been for prior rounds. So I think that's been helpful to see. And it's also helpful to understand that traditionally the OMB hasn't been that involved in the process of the awards. So the fact that the CDFI fund appears to be continuing business as usual without, at least expressing any concern that there may be a delay as a result of the executive orders and the announcement of the award. I think that cautiously optimistic, that will continue. However, as we've seen this year, you can't really assume anything as it relates to how this administration may get involved in any process. And so I think that that's one of those areas that we have to continue to watch and focus on, and not rest on our laurels of permanence, is that we still have these other potential issues that may pop up that could slow down and or delay the process, as it's doing right now with other CDFI grant programs. But to our knowledge, it hasn't yet. So we don't want to obviously say the sky is falling, but we obviously want to be aware of it. And I think that's, we talked about at the beginning, I talked about how important it was for us as an industry to have a unified voice during advocacy for permanency. I think that it's important that we continue to have that unified voice as it relates to these executive orders, and in ways that, we need to be speaking together as an industry and not coming up with individual ideas and going to Treasury or OMB with those ideas. I think that ultimately in the long run is probably not that helpful for us as an industry. And so I think in a way that we can kind of remember how important that unified voice was for advocacy for permanency. I think we need to stay focused on that as it relates to these executive orders. So between the executive director stepping down and the executive orders, it has caused some concern, but I think as of right now, things appear to be going forward as expected. But as I mentioned, that's for this round that we're currently in.
Right.
It's hard to say what that impact may be on the next round, where there may be more time to focus on changes that can be made through the application process. So I think, that is definitely something of interest to us. And I think we got a little bit of insight into what some of those changes may be, as we'll talk about in a minute here, and some of the things that the CDFI fund has released. But it's definitely all things to keep our eye on as we're looking at this next round.
And I would just add that Deputy Assistant Secretary Alexandria Smith sort of active and positive sort of engagement with the CDFI fund has definitely been very comforting in terms of the administrative and new architecture credits. So that's been great to see her level of engagement, and she has a lot to be engaged in. So seeing the time and effort that she's putting in is very positive.
And we obviously look forward to her comments at our conference in October as well, because she has been very reassuring, which obviously, as an appointed position, it's helpful to hear that at that level within Treasury.
Exactly.
So that's really helpful to hear. And she can't say it enough times. So as I'm sure she's listening to this podcast, it would be helpful to hear it more in New Orleans.
So let's talk about administrative actions. The CDFI fund administers the new market tax credit, and it's been a busy time for them over the last few months, with various administrative actions being taken and various revised documents being released. Please share with our audience some of the ones that are most impactful in your eyes.
Sure. Yeah, so there have been several, and that actually started back in in May, when the CDFI fund announced that they were going to have a temporary blackout period on the CDE certification process. So in order to apply for new market tax credits, you have to be certified as a CDE. So that's an important first step, obviously. And we had seen the CDFI fund pause CDFI certification the year before that for a period of time. And so during this blackout period, it was uncertain as to, what was going to happen. But on August 18th, the CDFI fund announced that they were lifting the CDE certification period on September 9th. And so we've been a couple weeks into that period and have been discussing what impacts any changes the new certification application may have. And so we're still reviewing some of that. But I think that this is an important first step because you can't have a blackout period and open up the next round, right? Because you have to allow, you would think that the CDFI fund would want to allow new organizations to become CDEs in order to apply for new markets tax credits. So when we reached out to the CDFI fund and asked them, are you going to lift this blackout period? They reassured us that they were going to do it in plenty of time before the next allocation round, so the 2026 round. And so when they, mentioned September 9th, in that communication, they also mentioned, and I think this is what's important for anyone who is interested in becoming a CDE should pay attention to, and who's interested in applying in the next round, is that they did set a date similar to the prior round. They did set a date that you would need to have your application submitted by in order to ensure that your application would have enough time to be reviewed and certified. And that date is Friday, November 7th. So that gives us obviously an important deadline to ensure that you get your CDE certification submitted by. But it also gives us a little bit of insight into the timing of the next round. Because for the first time, in the double round, the CDFI fund said that you had to be a certified CDE before the notice of allocation availability was announced, the NOAA. The NOAA is what opens up the next round and says, here, the next round will be open for this amount of time. The deadline is such. And so in prior rounds, you had some time after that NOAA was released to become a certified CDE. In the last round, they said, no, we want to cut that off and say only those that were certified at the time of the NOAA can apply. So the fact that the CDFI fund has given us this Friday, November 7th deadline kind of gives us an indication that they are gearing up for the next round. Last time, excuse me, that deadline was just over a month from when the next round opened. So when we look at some of these actions that the CDFI fund is taking, it gives us an indication that they're gearing up for this next round. And so, again, 30 days from November 7th is kind of goes into that December timeframe that I mentioned earlier of when the next round may open. In addition to the CDE certification, they also have released an update to their mapping tool. Their mapping tool is referred to as SIMS. Currently, SIMS is it's version 4. So SIMS 4 is currently what's being used. And so SIMS 5 is the new update. And they released a test site for it to allow users to go in to determine whether or not it works or not. It's essentially a beta version. And so we tested it. Members of the working group tested it and found, unfortunately, a lot of bugs in the system. And so last Friday, we submitted our comment letter to the CDFI fund of the different issues with the mapping tool. And so hopefully, before they release the official version of the mapping tool on October 6th, they'll have some of those bugs figured out. But it will become the new mapping tool, which is important because obviously when you're looking at your pipeline and when you're closing transactions, you have to essentially show that it's in a qualified census tract. And the CDFI fund in the last application round also added an additional distress criteria referred to as deep distress. And that is now included in this new SIMS 5 mapping tool. It's also included in the Novogradac mapping tool and has been for a while. So you can always go there to double check it. But SIMS is the authoritative tool when putting in your compliance file. So obviously we hope that they will make the updates to that to reduce some of the errors that we were seeing. And then finally, September 12th, they released the allocation agreement template. And the CDFI fund has been releasing this ahead of awards for several rounds now. And this has all kind of been an indication that, in the next month or so, get ready because we're going to make the award announcement, and we want to give you time to review an allocation agreement if you do get an award. And so it allows CDEs to review any changes that the CDFI fund is proposing in those allocation agreements. And those allocation agreements are the contract essentially between the CDFI fund and that CDE for any award that they receive in an allocation round. So it's an important document. It takes a little bit of time to review and to execute and then get approved by the CDFI fund. And so the less amount of time that it takes you to do that, the more quickly that you can begin using that new allocation that you've just received. And so the last 2 rounds that they submitted the allocation agreement template, it was 44 days, both rounds, before they opened up the next round. So talking about those little nuggets that they've been leaving out there, breadcrumbs of when the next round may open, that's another one. And as I mentioned, we were specifically looking at this new allocation agreement template to see if there were any changes to it that may indicate ways that the CDFI fund is trying to align the new market tax credit program with these executive orders that we discussed earlier, right? And with the executive orders being focused on, different things like DEI and green initiatives and so forth, there were, a lot of us were wondering, are there things that they have determined that are currently included in the application and the allocation agreement that would fall under that category, maybe change? And so we did see one change related to innovative investments and unrelated CDEs that are minority or Native American controlled CDEs. And so that it is now falls under, there is another category within innovative investments already referred to as investments in unrelated CDEs. And so the CFI fund is just kind of collapsing those 2 different innovative investments into one. And so I think that is likely as a result of trying to align the allocation agreement more closely with the executive orders. And personally, I think it gives us a little bit of a window into what the CFI fund may do with the next round's application. And so I would kind of expect that change to carry forward into the application, which we haven't seen yet, but it is not out of the realm of possibility. I don't think would be considered a significant change and one that they could make even in a year in which the allocation application isn't open for public comment.
So thank you for all of that. That's a great overview and some of the recent releases or administrative actions that the CDFI fund has taken as they affect the new market tax credit. You mentioned that New Market Tax Credit Working Group did comment on the mapping tool. I know there's been a number of other comment letters that the New Market Tax Credit Working Group has submitted to the CDFI fund, as well as other activities. Please take a moment to share some of the work that the New Market Tax Credit Group has done over the last few months. And I will note to the audience, we are going to have an in-person meeting, the New Market Tax Credit Working Group in New Orleans. And if you're interested, reach out to Brad.
Yeah, sure. And I appreciate that. And we do invite you to reach out and find out more about joining. So a couple of different things that we have worked on over the past. So a lot of obviously effort this year has been focused on permanency and all of the efforts that were made, not only by our group and our members, but many of the others in the industry. But every year also, for example, the IRS put down a priority guidance plan that lists the different things that it will focus on in its next fiscal year to provide regulatory guidance. We submit something every year to this priority guidance plan of things that they could provide additional guidance on that would provide some additional clarity. I've lost count of how many years we've gone without any guidance. I think it's closer to 15 now than it is 10. However, we continue to submit our comments related to that. We've also, for example, submitted comments related to the corporate alternative minimum tax. The big thing this past year that we focused on was, as I mentioned just a moment ago, the application was submitted to the public for comments, and it does this every 3 years. It's required to. And there were some substantive changes in this last update. And so we spent a lot of time focused on those comments. And I will say that included in those comments were some kind of more policy related comments related to transparency about the process. And that is something that we intend to continue to focus on for the remainder of this year and going into the next year, especially as we get past this current round and look at the next round. We've had some good conversations with Deputy Assistant Secretary Smith and others at the CFI Fund about ways that we believe that there can be some improvements to the process related to transparency and so forth that would be very welcomed by the industry. So we're continuing to work on that. So those are just a couple of the different things that we've worked on. We also prepare a lot of tools for our members related to the application process. And then also one of the things that we developed recently was the multi-CDE fee disclosure template. And if you've worked on a transaction in the last year, you've probably seen some version of it. And, that was really an effort within the working group to kind of try to create a universal fee disclosure so that not only all of the parties involved in these transactions would be accustomed to, but also would be useful for the quality borrowers in the transaction as well.
No, I thank you for all of that. And I know I myself always appreciate when some new guidance has come out, or like the allocation template and the rest, getting that red line copy.
Right.
Makes it a lot easier to hop in and sort of review it and see where the key changes were. And then, Brad, I know that you're going to be back in a few weeks to discuss the tax equity market. And that's something that we didn't have time to cover today, but you'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk about that. Obviously, with the double round coming, and then the changes with the renewables being phased down because of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, along with low-income tax credits being expanded so much. There's lots of discussion about the tax equity markets. That's going to be a great episode with you and some of the other partners to discuss. And then you'll also be back once the awards are announced. And hopefully that's within 30 days.
Hopefully so. Hopefully so.
So hopefully you'll get number 21 and 22 in terms of your appearances on the podcast pretty quickly. But before I go to the off mic section, I wanted to give you an opportunity to share other information that you think is critical for our audience to know in advance of New Orleans conference and your next appearance.
Yeah, so obviously, I think that's what I'd love to invite everyone to join us in New Orleans. It's one of my favorite places. I grew up in Baton Rouge, so 70 miles up the road from there, and so I always enjoy being in New Orleans. And what a great place to be to celebrate 25 years, to celebrate permanence. And as you mentioned, we have a lot of surprises for attendees. So if there's a year to join us in New Orleans, it will be this year. It'll be a lot of fun. And we really are going to have, I think, our first opportunity to all celebrate together as an industry, and it's well deserved based on all the efforts that everyone made. So join us in New Orleans, October 23rd and 24th. We have a great agenda in place. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I know we'll also have some links in the show notes today. So, but we hope that you'll join us and book your room quick.
Yes, indeed. And we also have a workshop day on October 23rd. So if those be newer, you might be interested in checking out a workshop day. And also those of you that are more experienced, we always have something that's more basic and something more advanced. So please check that out as well. And thank you, Brad, for joining. Please hang around for the off mic section. I will include Brad's contact information in today's show notes. So if you're a CDE, a wannabe CDE, if you're a business seeking low-cost new market tax credit financing, and if you're an investor, if you're in any of those areas or other areas related to North tax credits and you want Brad's insights, please reach out to him. Before we get to the off mic section, as I do every week, I encourage our audience to subscribe to Tax Credit Tuesday on whatever platform you get your podcasts. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, please take a moment to comment on and like the video. It helps raise our visibility. It helps others hear and see the discussion we're having today with my partner, Brad. I also encourage you to share the podcast with your colleagues. It's a great way to get them started on the many incentives that we cover. And I've been at various conferences where folks tell me that when someone joins, if they don't have experience with new markets or one of the other tax credits or tax incentives that we work with, oftentimes they'll have binge watch a number of episodes in the area they work as a way to get a rapid start in this unique area of taxes. So let's turn now to our Up Mic section. This is a fun space to give a shout out to others working in the community development community, where we can highlight someone who's worthy of recognition. Brad, who would you like to shout out?
Yeah, so this was actually kind of hard. Obviously, as you mentioned, we have a lot to celebrate. There's a lot of exuberance related to new markets tax credits, and I don't know how else we skip over. I don't think there's any way to skip over the fact that permanence is kind of the thing that we're all excited about right now and celebrating. And so my shout out is to Senator Daines and his efforts to help make new market tax credits permanent. When the One Big Beautiful Bill Act came over from the House, as you know, new markets tax credits wasn't included in that. And it truly was with his leadership that he was able to get that in. Obviously, there was a lot of efforts within the industry to advocate for it and show their support to Senator Daines to show how important of a tool it is. And he really, I think, carried a lot of the water to ensure that it was made permanent in those days when a lot of negotiations were being had of what can be added to the Senate version of the bill. And the fact that was one of his top 3 items really was tremendous. And, as I mentioned before, we hadn't seen anything like that related to new market tax credit advocacy in the past. And so it was just great to see it come to fruition. So I want to personally thank Senator Daines for obviously taking that step to make it permanent. And I think all of us share in that as well.
And let me echo that shout out. As you have noted, the new market tax credit has strong bipartisan, bicameral support. It has Democratic and Republican leads in both the House and the Senate. And when it did come down to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act being considered in the Senate, everyone was turning and leaning pretty heavily on Senator Steve Daines from Montana in terms of getting permanency new market tax credit in the bill. And it was so exciting to see him rally the support of so many other Republican senators in support of the effort. And I have no doubt that we wouldn't be where we are today without all of his sort of efforts. So kudos to Senator Steve Daines of Montana. And with that, let me say again, thank you for being on the podcast today, Brad.
Great to be here.
And
Thank
to
you.
our audience, I'm Michael Novogradac. Thanks for listening. And those on YouTube, thanks for watching.
This weekly podcast has been brought to you by Novogradac Company, LLP. Archived podcasts are available online at www.novoco.com/podcast or by subscribing to the Tax Credit Tuesday podcast in iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Radio Public. You can find related links referenced in this podcast on our website at www.novoco.com/podcast. Novogradac Company, LLP is a national certified public accounting and consulting firm with offices nationwide. Learn more about our professional services at www.novoco.com.